Oh, hey, everybody. Welcome. Martinis with Scott, episode 70, I think. They're really starting to add up. Cheers. Hope you're enjoying your Thursday late afternoon, evening. I know I'm late to the bar again. Why are you late to the bar, Scott? 2 weeks in a row. Well, last week I explained. This week is because I was ready to go on air, and we're in the middle of a negotiation, a serious negotiation, trying to save probably 150 jobs in a small region in Canada. And in the middle of the negotiation, we had a big conference call this morning. I got our lawyer, our counsel, to agree to do something, make a call as a one-two pitch to a stakeholder that we're negotiating with, and then they didn't do it. I found out just before I was about to go on air, and they didn't do it because they decided they wanted more retainer money in a different engagement letter, which was fair. They do need more money in a different engagement letter, but they just didn't do the work that they were supposed to do, and they screwed up the entire negotiation. And it's a serious issue. I'll probably be able to fix it tomorrow, but it just pissed me off, and I was too angry to go on air. So I thought I'd have a drink, a little bit of vodka from the Fernie Distillers here in Fernie, British Columbia. And anyways, that's why I'm late. So there we go. As I said, welcome. Martinis with Scott, a show about winning momentum in business and in life. What are we going to talk about today? So I saw a post on LinkedIn this week, and it made me chuckle. Maybe because I was laughing so I wasn't crying. But it talks about entrepreneurial success rates, business failure statistics, and it speaks to a lot. I think I did a show on this a couple of weeks ago, or a segment on this a couple of weeks ago. One of the quotes from someone's recent book out in the US is that over 1 million people in this country start a business of some sort every year. And by the end of the first year, 40% of the 1 million new businesses have failed by the end of year one. And within 5 years, more than 80% have failed. And in 10 years, another 80 of the 50% that haven't yet failed, they fail. Of the 20% that haven't yet failed. So if you do all that math, you come up with a 96% failure rate in 10 years, an 80% failure rate in 5 years. I never know where these statistics come from. Everywhere I read the statistics, they're always different. But my statistics that I've relied on, which is the entire premise, not the entire, but a premise for Martinis with Scott, is that over 90% of businesses never ever pay the entrepreneur, the business owner, a living wage. They can't pay their rent, and they can't eat from the business that they've created. Yet, if you look at social media and writings in the business media that are, podcasts, blogs, that sort of stuff, that sort of content is almost all geared towards lead a purposeful, free life, be an entrepreneur. That's the way to go, without ever telling you that 96% of these things fail, or that over 90% will never ever pay you a wage, which is not a reason not to do it. I think you should be an entrepreneur, but you need to be aware of those stats. You need to be aware of the trouble that you're getting into. And one of my hopes for Martinis with Scott is that we can sit down once a week and maybe change those odds, right? Give you some management tools, some skills, some problem solving skills, some critical thinking, and a martini every now and then to dull the pain, so that maybe we can improve the success rate on entrepreneurs. So part of the article was that there was a BC Insights, I don't know what they are, some government group, I think, took a close look at 1,100 startups that had failed. And when they went through their data, this is 2018, they came up with the top 20 contributing reasons for failures. Here's the top 4. No, by the way, this doesn't add up to 100%. It adds up to way more than 100%. So presumably, the failed entrepreneur was permitted to tick off more than one reason for their demise. Number 1, drum roll, no market for the product or service, 42%. No market for the product or service. Number 2, ran out of cash, 29%. How do you define failure? Why is that not 100%? I mean, was there ever an entrepreneur that had a couple $1 million in the bank and things were, they got some cash left and they're not running out of cash anytime soon, and they thought to themselves, we failed? We're just going to shut down. We have failed. We've got money in the bank, but we failed. I mean, that never happened. I don't understand why running out of cash is not a symptom rather than a cause. Being able to attract the equity that you needed for your deal, that could be a cause, right? But running out of cash seems to me that answer ought to be 100%, and it's a symptom of the failure, not otherwise. Number 3, not the right team, 23%. Number 4, in the top 4, outcompeted, 19%. So as I said, that adds up to more than 100%, 113 off the top of my head. Well, that's not off the top of my head, it's according to my screen here. So the entrepreneur was able to check off multiple reasons. But what I propose to you and what I want to talk about is that those top 4 reasons, no market for product or service, running out of cash, not the right team, outcompeted, that's really one reason. And that reason is management. And in my business, when I'm dealing with troubled companies or I'm trying to help entrepreneurs, 100% of the time, it comes down to management. It's not a victim issue. It's not some global macroeconomic shift, although COVID certainly challenges that notion. But it's a management issue. So let's look at these more closely. 61% were unable to sell their product because there was no market or they were outcompeted. So I'm combining sort of number 1 and 4 there. There's no market for my product or I was outcompeted. What does that mean? It means the entrepreneur was, created a business, they have a product or service, and they weren't able to sell it. Bottom line. And then they're claiming they're victims because, there was no market for what I created, or my competition beat me, therefore I ran out of money and I failed. That is a management failure. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. It's a management failure. It's a lack of persistence. A number of years ago, I'm going to figure out how to tell you this story without disclosing too much because it's this fellow's become a family friend. But he created he's a craftsman, and he's a very artistic and very handy fellow, and he created hand builds a sports related product that people in that particular sport would be really, really excited to buy. And he got a little bit of a venture loan from a government program, and I became a mentor, which was a formalized function under that government program. But in any event, I would have been a mentor to him, whether he needed it formal or not, or more specifically, he would have asked me to do that, whether he needed it formal or not. And so this guy created great products. He was well known in his industry. His financials were super easy, and I had my back office helping him anyways. So that was not an issue. But this entrepreneur failed in that business, and he was never able to pay himself a wage. Why? Because there was no market for his product, according to him, and he was outcompeted by people that were doing similar handcrafted, custom-made products with their own designs, much like he was able to do on his product. He could do custom design work on the thing that he was trying to sell you. The truth of the matter is, he didn't want to sell, right? There was no marketing or sales effort beyond his local community and friendship group, which was really, really, really small. And everybody that knew him and was a friend with him bought his product because it was really cool and really good. But beyond that, he just never expanded his market. He never got the attention of the marketplace. He never explained why someone should spend all that money and wait all that time to get this type of sports product that we're talking about. And that business was a failure. I guarantee you, if he had sat down and filled out a questionnaire, which I can't imagine who does that when their business fails, but if they sat down and filled out a questionnaire as to why they failed as an entrepreneur, he would have said there was no market for my product. He wouldn't have said I didn't go sell it. I didn't market it. I didn't implement all of these, ideas that had come to him or that were provided through me or through other people to try and do this, that he wasn't interested. He was interested in being in his shop and building these products with the art and craftsmanship that goes along with it. And God bless him for doing that. But that's not entrepreneurial. That's not being an entrepreneur. That's not what needs to happen to make a company a success. And so I would submit to you that basically every single entrepreneur, the 61% that say they failed because they couldn't sell their product and position themselves as a victim of that, like, the market just didn't like what I had to say. That's not the reason for their failure. The reason for their failure is management and a lack of persistence. And as I said, I'm going to get into that a bit more. 23% said they don't have the right team. That's management. That's the truth. 100% of this, 100% of these failures on the top 4 were management related. Back down later on the top 20 list, there were some that were not management related. But my experience is it's always management. And to me, this list proves it. So lesson number 1 that I took from this, the thing that made me laugh, by the way, was that only where were we 29% of these entrepreneurs thought they ran out of cash was the reason that they that they closed their business. All right, lesson 1. Being an entrepreneur is about embracing failure. You need to fail. If you're not trying, if you're not failing, you're not trying. You need to embrace it. You need to learn from it. It's not the market, it's you. What are the chances of you writing a business plan? You come up with an idea for your product and service, you sit down, you write a business plan. What are the odds of that plan working? Well, it's close to 0. I can tell you that from my experience. I can tell you that from 1,000 companies that I've helped with this. No one's business plan works ever. The value of a business plan, and this is lesson number 2 that I take out of this, is the value of a business plan is not the written document that is done at the end of the day, because that's crap. The value is the thinking that goes into creating the plan and the debate back and forth. Should we position it this way? Where do we sit? It's the whole thought process in creating the plan that's valuable, because it forces you to take a position, consider different alternatives, and to come up with your position, with your strategy. This is what our business is about. And then you're going to fail. The odds of you getting that right day 1 are pretty much 0. And so what do? Do you just say, okay, well, I'm a failure and go home, right? Fill out a questionnaire. Is that the plan? Or do you do what all entrepreneurs who are successful do, is you relentlessly and persistently try different things. You iterate your product, you iterate your service, you evolve to the market, you try this, you try that, you A/B test, and you see what works. By the way, this idea that entrepreneurialism and success is about persistence is true, but it's not about persistence doing the same thing that's failing over and over and over and over again. It's about persistence in trying different things, doing it quickly, and learning from the failures and applying it to the next iteration of your product, service, of your business plan, right? So you have to have a mission. You have to have a general direction without being too hung up on the specifics. You need to try lots of things, and you need to iterate. That's lesson number 2. Lesson number 3, entrepreneurship is a creative process, okay? It's not just logical business. It is a creative process. You're taking a risk, and you're creating, by definition, you're creating something that doesn't exist. You're trying to fit yourself into a marketplace with something new. So what is a creative process? Let's turn it to art, okay? And whether that art is fine arts or music or whatever, is it about having a vision, sitting down and creating a world-changing painting or piece of music? That's not what it's about. It's about having a vision, which you probably can't define very well. You can't write down exactly where you're going to end up in a business plan. You just have a general direction and a strategy to start off. So you have a vision as an artist, and you relentlessly produce and change and evolve and iterate and learn. You produce art. There's things about it you don't like, and so the next time you learn. and you try something different, and you just keep producing. And I don't care if it's fine art or music or creating technology. Technology creation is not about some smart fellow or gal sat down and created a world-beating phone or some communication gadget. It's about iteration. They created something, it was kind of okay, it sort of sucked, and then they learned, and they do a next version, and the next version, and the next version. And then all of a sudden the market sees version 10, they think it's version 1, and it's a world-beating product that still needs to get much better. Mozart, I was reading this not so long ago, he died at 35, I believe, and they say he was creating music from the time he was 5. Who knows how sophisticated that music was at 5, but let's just say it was awesome. And so he had 30 years of productivity. He produced over 650 works of music. Over 650 in 30 years. That's an average of 2 a month, every month from the time he was 5 until the time he died, right? How many Mozart songs do you know, or pieces of work do you know, right? It's not 650. It's the top of that batch of work that makes Mozart in the public mind what he is. And all of the greatest creative minds in human history were producers. They learned from their failures, they evolved, they created tons of content, tons of product, tons of art, and the best of it rose to the top, and they became who they are in the public's perception. Same thing as an entrepreneur, right? You need a direction, no matter how well defined that direction may be, and then you need to keep trying different things, as many things as possible. Learn what works, learn what doesn't work, evolve to your market, because the only thing that's guaranteed is that your plan when you started isn't going to work, right? It's got to change. Look at Elon Musk. I'm not an expert on his career, but he's always, to me, so amazing. He's building world-beating cars. He's just announced a plant. They're setting up in Texas for world-beating trucks. He's got boring going on in Nevada, I believe. He's got a mission to go to Mars. He's running SpaceX. He's doing all these things. And we see him in the public, as the public, we see that, wow, great success. How many ideas and technologies do you think Musk has started that have failed, right? I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but I bet you it's not 0. I bet you it's hundreds. I bet you it's, creative ideas. Let's, dab our toe into this. Let's see where we get to. And then quickly figuring out, that doesn't work. Let's focus on this, right? And doing that nonstop all the time. That's what being an entrepreneur is all about. If you're not failing, you're not trying. And if you're going to fail, don't do it because your original idea wasn't saleable. That's not entrepreneurship. That's just giving up. All right. Cheers again. Critical thinking in business. You've all heard the saying, in negotiation, you need to be able to walk away, right? Think of yourself. I think of myself when I was a younger me in my early 30s, and for some reason while I was living in Toronto, I just needed a Porsche. I decided that was kind of a life goal, an idiotic life goal, by the way. I don't recommend that at all. I'm not picking on the Porsche brand, just the consumerism part of what I'm saying. I needed a Porsche, and so I didn't have any alternatives. It wasn't up for discussion. I needed a Porsche. I didn't need a BMW. I didn't need a Mercedes. I didn't need some other sports car. I needed to have a Porsche. And so I wander up to the Porsche dealership. Now, what do you think my negotiating position is in a Porsche dealership when I'm that age and I have the money and I need a Porsche? It's not very good, right? And so one thing that I learned early about the Porsche brand is you say, okay, so what kind of deals are on this car? And they say, what do you mean? There are no deals. We're Porsche. We don't cut our price, like that's it. And you know what you say? If you want a Porsche, you say, okay. Also, can I get these add-ons? Maybe I can pay more. Can I figure out some way to make this more expensive for myself? And that's what you do, because you're not prepared. That's what I did. You're not prepared to walk away from the deal. Okay, being prepared to walk away in a negotiation, to me, is a form of critical thinking. It's a sense of looking at all the facts and all the alternatives, quantifying the risk, and at least understanding the possibilities of the decision. And it's, because it's not, in that example, it's not, I want a Porsche. That shouldn't be the decision. It should be, I want a Porsche, but if I'm not getting a Porsche, what is my alternative? Is a BMW a good alternative? Is a Maserati a good alternative? Right? And what's the quantification of the risks and rewards of each one of those choices? That to me is critical thinking, and it is a huge part of being a success in business and affecting change within your organization. It's hard. Critical thinking is really hard, and the reason it's hard is because the human brain is designed to work off prejudice, to work off assumptions, a confirmation bias. So you start off with the idea that a Porsche is what I want, and then instead of looking all the facts on the different alternatives, and maybe the Maserati people would negotiate or what have you, your brain wants the Porsche, so it looks for facts that justify the decision. That's confirmation bias. Okay, I want this. I've already made that decision, regardless of any of the facts. So I'm going to ignore facts that don't support my decision. I'm going to seek facts that support my decision. And if I'm faced with a bunch of facts that don't support me, I'm going to change my interpretation of those facts to meet my predetermined goal. That is confirmation bias, and that is not critical thinking. That's the opposite of critical thinking. But confirmation bias is the way the brain works. Okay, and so I'll give you another example. In 2001, I actually might make this a longer story because I think it's got a couple examples of critical thinking. I was wandering around Bay Street as a 31-year-old or something like that. Sorry, 35-year-old. And I was out trying to sell in the tech bubble. I was out trying to sell a capital raise. I wanted to raise several $1 million. I think I ended up raising $8 million or something like that at a public company. And we were trading, but we were trading at like 5 cents, and it traded Tuesdays to Thursdays, as they say. And I was trying to sell stock at 81 cents a share is what. So I ended up selling $8 million at 81 cents a share into a 5 cent market when no one else was raising any money at all. And so one of the ways that I was able to do that is when I was out, dealing with these people and drinking every night and having dinners every night and doing my pitches and, just going around the way that street works, people started pitching things at me instead. And one of the things they pitched me was a financial firm that was also public, and it owns some mutual funds and dealers, a securities dealer, a mutual fund dealer. And they said, Scott, you need to put $1 million into this company at 10 cents a share, which is trading at 10 cents a share because it's awesome and it's going to grow. And, for a month, I ignored these people pitching this to me. And eventually, I started to actually like the deal. From a strategic point of view, it fit within what I was trying to accomplish. It was another asset. And from a creativity perspective, because I'm pretty financially creative, I could see a bunch of chess moves ahead as to where this might fit and help me in my mission to actually raise money from other people at 81 cents a share into my lousy 5 cent market. But did I go along and put $1 million into somebody else's deal into a 10 cent share? No, absolutely not. I was looking at this company and I saw that they had first secured debt owned by a fellow in Germany, a high net worth individual. And I cold called this person. I found his information and cold called him. And I said, hey, I'd like to buy that debt from you that is first secured in this financial firm. And he said, oh my God, they won't even return my call. I'm not getting paid. I don't get my interest. And he said, I'll sell it to you. I said, cool. I said, I don't want to pay you any money for it. But what I will do is I'll trade you. I'm selling shares in this other company over here at 81 cents a share. I'll issue you those shares, and you, in exchange, instead of giving me money, you give me this debt of this financial company. I said, great, send me the package. I sent him the package. Within a week, we closed that deal, and I owned the first secured debt. of this financial firm, and what it cost me was these 81-cent shares in a 5-cent market. I'm not saying that my 81 shares were shit, okay, but because I believed in it, I put my own money into it and it worked out fine, but it was a 5-cent market. So that was an excellent trade. What I then did is, having researched the shareholder base of this financial firm, I found that there was a fund, I believe in Minneapolis, who had just put in, I think, $3 million at the 10 cents a share, which is what these other guys were trying to get me to do. So he actually wrote the check for $3 million into their fund, and it was literally a few weeks before this was all going down. And I cold called him, and I literally called. This was 2001. I might have had a BlackBerry, but I might have been pre-cell phone. I literally was at a payphone at a Wendy's on the side of the highway, and I called him I cold called him, or I emailed him or something, and we set up the call, and I introduced myself, and I said, look, I just bought this debt, there's going to be restructuring, and your $3 million is probably going to go away, or it's going to be a hell of a lot less than it was, and I just wanted to give you some heads up on that. I said, and he said, oh, and I said, I'll tell you what I'll do though, is if you put a bunch of money into my 81-cent deal, I will take care of you on your 10-cent $3 million problem. I'll make that right for you. I'll create another instrument that lets you preserve that value. He said, cool. We closed the deal on the payphone at Wendy's. He wired the check, and that combined with the German fellow were my lead orders, which kicked off my $8 million raise at the 81 cents. And then I took my first secured position at the financial company, and I acted on it. I went after them, and there was also some lawsuits. The shareholders freaked out, and so on and so forth. Here's an important lesson in business: the debt always wins, always. And that's the creative, critical thinking. If someone tells you to buy some stock in something, is there no other alternative to get into this business? Of course there is. There's other alternatives. You need to evaluate and think about them. Why, if their first secured debt isn't being serviced and they're technically insolvent, why would I buy the shares? It makes no sense, right? You need to be able to think through on a critical basis what the alternatives are. I acted on the debt. We got 100% ownership of that company. It was no longer public. We owned the fund. We owned the mutual funds dealer. We owned the securities firm. And that was a pretty good deal and an example of critical thinking. Here's an example of confirmation bias. With that company, I inherited an office at the corner of Bay and Wellington. Bay Street is like Wall Street in New York. The Toronto version of that. I had the entire third floor. It's a small footprint, that building, but was about 6,800 square feet, as I recall. And we wedged about 15 people into this massive 6,800 square feet. And it had great leaseholds, a great boardroom facility, and it cost me like 30 grand a month. I had zero need for it, but I convinced myself through confirmation bias and ego, I convinced myself that this was really important, and man, was it fun. It was so much fun, but it was crazy expensive and it was stupid. And I let ego and confirmation bias allow me to spend that $30,000 odd a month in 2001, really for no reason. It was just a complete waste of money. I could have moved out of the core. We could have had much smaller space. We could have done a lot of things better. And to this day, I'm phobic of real estate. Sinclair Range has footprints in New York, Toronto, and Calgary, but they're small footprints. And we operate predominantly as a virtual firm. And so there's a little lesson about how hard it is to just look at the facts and make a good business decision. Now, for me, I think my success, despite the story I just told you, I think one of the reasons for my success is at affecting change within a business is the innate ability to think critically, which I attribute certainly to my upbringing, but also I think my upbringing gave me a contrarian viewpoint on a number of things. But I think more importantly, I'm an accountant by trade. I'm a chartered accountant in Canada now, a CPA, a chartered professional accountant. And what that trains you to do, or at least what it trained me to do, is to look at the other side of the equation, right? So for every debit, there's a credit, double entry accounting. For every credit, there's a debit. So it doesn't matter what somebody says to me in real life, outside of accounting, I always think, oh, what's the other side of that, right? You want to do this. Oh, what's the credit on that? What's the other side of that? That's just the way my brain works. And so it forces immediately a form of critical thinking for me. And I think that's been a huge success. And I think it's a major, we talk about these entrepreneurs that fail and, 4% survive after a certain period of time, and, more than 90% never pay a living wage. A large part of that is not iterating, not being creative, going through that creative process, but it's also not, it's being fixated on one thing and confirmation bias instead of critical thinking. All right, so let's apply that to a current life example. I've been talking to you about this real person with a fake name, Mary. And if you haven't been listening the last few shows, cheers again. If you haven't been listening the last few shows, so this is a youngish entrepreneur who took on a partner that turned out to be not what she had hoped, as most partnerships turn out to be. Started a retail operation, and now there's a fight, and they both provided money to the business, and it's unclear. It's clear to me that Mary provided her quote unquote investment as a loan, whereas the partner that she's feuding with says it's not a loan, it's an investment, as if that were some sort of legal term that made any sense. And so I won't go through the details of the history of this, but I've agreed to help this person. I talked about we need to create a trigger, and we need to set a bogey on the expectations for the negotiation. So to do that, we sent a demand letter, and the demand letter said, hey, we loaned this business $140,000, and you have 10 days to pay it back, or we're going to shut the business down. And so we did that. And then last week I updated you that there was a reply, and it was really, okay, we're going to pay you. I don't remember what the details were, but it said we're going to pay you less than you asked for, and we're going to do it over a period of time. And I've said to Mary repeatedly, said I'm not too fussed about the amount that you get back. We can negotiate on that, but it has to be real. In this never plan, these people don't intend to pay you. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. So don't buy into this plan that they put it forward to you. And so we sent a plan back. I don't recall if I told you that last week, but I said, the demand still stands, but without prejudice basis, we're happy to try and solve this thing. And the way that we'll do that is we'll accept the payment plan, but we want more upfront. And I want Mary to be first secured on the business with a share pledge going forward, so that if you don't pay her, if you're just trying to screw her, then she doesn't have to fight with you anymore. She could just take this thing over. And we haven't heard back yet. Although a funny side story on that is the other side of this dispute was emailing internally. So there's two sisters on the other side, and the one sister was emailing the sister, copying in what I believe to be the mother and a brother and two lawyers, but they also copied in Mary by mistake. So and she kept forwarding them to me. So all week long I'm seeing these internal communications from the other side, and she's flat out saying, here's our strategy. We need to call it an investment, not a loan, because there's an important legal distinction, and that makes the money unrecoverable for Mary. Like, it's in writing. I have it. They're just flat out trying to screw this poor girl and take the business without paying her. They flat out admitted that. So there's a little funny sidebar. It's crazy what happens in these situations. You wonder why entrepreneurs fail. So we served the demand. So now the question, it expires in the next few days. And the answer is, then what? And I had a long talk with Mary yesterday, and I asked her that question. I said, we need to do something. We can't just not do something. And so there's a list of things that we could do. And you can't just make a threat and then not go through with it, right? We need to just keep methodically trying to collect your debt because you've got your creditor hat on, your ledger hat on, and we need to collect. And so the confirmation bias is, it manifests itself in, okay, yeah, I get that, but here's a laundry list of a million things as to why we can't do what you suggest. I'm not going to tell you, in case they're watching this show, I've been open and, sort of disclose this whole thing, but I'm not going to disclose the next steps at the moment. I'll tell you afterwards. But you say, well, we can't do that. We can't do this. We can't do that. And here's a reason. And the way you see confirmation bias is you challenge every one of those. Okay, so give me your number one reason. Well, it's this. Okay, well, here's why that's not a problem. And here's a strategy for how to fix that risk. Okay, well, it's this. All right, well, here's a way that we could fix that and not have that problem. And then it gets down to the ridiculousness, like, well, I'm afraid I'm going to show up at the store, they're going to be standing outside, and they're going to attack me physically. Like, really? Is that a risk? I mean, if you're scared about that, we need to take that seriously. But it just gets down to this level of, it's like what you hear about Trump. It's like orange man bad is the final argument, right? And if you deal with that, you go back to the beginning, right? You just keep throwing to the list because the brain is searching for a way to not accept the obvious conclusion. It's just faced with this confirmation bias followed by cognitive dissonance. So how are we trying to deal with that? I'm trying to deal with that by asking her to just go away and write down her top 3 fears about doing anything on this. And we're going to talk later. We're going to talk about those fears and come up with a strategy for each one of them. And if those are your top 3 and we deal with them, well, hopefully that proves the point that there's a way around this. Critical thinking, being able to get over your fears, to evaluate objectively the risks and reward of all possibilities. First of all, you need to know what those possibilities are. But if you do, you then need to not focus on why they're not going to work. You need to, and the risks and the yeah buts, you need to focus on what's the reward of each one of these and what's a realistic risk, and then just compare them and come up with your plan. It's the key to affecting change. Critical thinking is the key to making decisions. Confirmation bias to me is the number one issue at companies that are not affecting change and where things aren't working. I always tell my staff, we walk into a troubled business, everybody always knows what's wrong with it. It's not a mystery. You don't need to hire McKinsey or Bain to drop in and write you a report for hundreds or millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to say, this is the issue. We already know the issue. The problem is nobody believes it could be fixed. Why don't they believe it could be fixed? Fear. What is fear? Fear is just objection. In this instance, fear is just objections. Is a failure to fight your confirmation bias. It's a lack of critical thinking. Try and find a way to learn to critically think. Take a step back. Talk to third parties who don't have your confirmation bias. And I think step number 1 is recognizing that confirmation bias exists, and there's a way to think your way out of that problem. All right, everybody's looking for a Novanni update. I've had a not good week. Well, Novanni's had a fine week. It's been great. I personally have not been involved. I've been swamped on other matters. We had to get a SIM out, a confidential information memorandum on a financing we're doing for a client, which requires a model. It turns out to be like a 36-page prospectus-like document. It was every time I do one of those things, I just want to die. Like, it's just so much. Anyways, we got it out the door. So I've been, just a little bit paying attention to Novanni. But the update for this week, orders are picking up because we're starting to fill them. We just got a significant new order in from Home Depot, which is consistent with Roofers World, which is another company I've talked to you about. They're just knocking it out of the park right now. They've never had revenue month over month so strong. And I think Novanni's starting to see some of the benefits of that. One thing interesting we did this week is I'm really concerned, and if you're running a business, you just, in this environment, you need to be really hypersensitive to counterparty risk. So look at your receivables. Look at your receivable list, the people that you extend credit to. If you sell a product and don't get paid, I don't care if it's for 10 days or 90 days or if you made some sort of special deal and it's longer than that, you have loaned that person money. And if you loan that person money in this environment, everybody's having financial trouble. There's restructuring going on left, right, and center. Can you afford to lose that money? You need to stay on top of your receivables. So one thing I did do on Novanni is I went through our entire receivable list. I started asking questions about everybody over 60 days. Most of them were fine. You know, there's a bunch of credits involved and all sorts of accounting issues. One thing I did learn, I talked to you last week, I think, about the rep channel, how they haven't been paid for, for 6 months or 8 months or some. So there's a bunch of money outstanding to these reps. And in my mind, I divide old debt and new debt. So, or not new debt, but new services. So basically when I step in June, I can start paying these people. I've already approved the June rep payment, but I'm not yet ready to deal with the old debt because I don't know if we're going to restructure, who's being productive, who's not being productive. And what I found on my over 60-day receivable list is that we actually sell to a rep. They rep services for us. They rep products for us. So we sell to the end customer. The rep gets a commission. The commission goes to the payables list, and then they don't pay it. But also the rep is buying from us. Do you think the rep pays us? Nope. So what they're doing is unbeknownst to us, because we never sat down to figure it out, is they're paying down their old payables by taking product from us. Who are they selling that product to, I wonder? Since they're a rep and they don't have a use for a bunch of sinks, I think that they're flipping it out to our customer base, and that's the way that they're collecting commissions. That's the only logical conclusion. So in the normal course, you would say, well, that's actually entrepreneurial or creative on their part. No harm to us in the sense that we owe them this money anyways, and that's all true. But I've told all reps, including this rep, that I'm not paying the old debt right now. We may restructure, we may come up with a plan, and so everybody else has effectively stayed, right, and for a month or two till I get back to them and tell them what we're able to do, except for this crafty rep. This crafty rep has found a way around that system. And so now I'm faced with the decision, do I put a stop to that? I think the answer is yes. It's the only fair thing to do. And so I'll be putting a stop to that. I have to have that discussion with them tomorrow or maybe Monday. What else is going on? Orders are picking up, rep discussions. That's about all I did on Novanni this week. I do have an interesting next week. So we have a significant, not significant, we have a small, if that ever comes back to haunt me, we have a small but expensive environmental problem on the land that we took over that the building sits on. And the environmental costs are identified from a company in the US that Novanni was spun out from a long time ago. And so part of that spin out was an environmental indemnity. And so they pay the consultants and the lawyers, and then there's the accusation or allegation, which I don't believe to be true, but there's an allegation from a neighbor that there's cross-contamination, so the neighbor's suing the company as well. And again, the US people are paying the lawyers and handling that lawsuit. And as part of some settlement way back when that had nothing to do with me, there's some other real estate we took over, and that same US party provided a low interest mortgage on that real estate. So Novanni, under prior management, has this existential issue from an economic point of view, and they've really they just kind of hang out, listen to phone calls, complain because it's bureaucratic and takes a long time, but they really haven't been doing anything about it. And my view on the entire environmental industry, the consultants and the lawyers, is it's just a scam. Like you talk to a different consultant and you get a different answer, and you talk to a different consultant, you get a different answer. Nobody really knows the answer. It's all about who can convince the regulator. And I'm not complaining about environmental. Like, I'm all over clean earth and companies doing the right things, clean water, clean air. I'm all over that. But the way that the industry goes about it is just a sham most of the time, I find. So you have to have people you trust. And so this will be an interesting, very material issue. And I think we've got a call scheduled with the lawyer Monday. So we'll let you know how that goes. Where am I at? I'm 45 minutes in. I think I'm out of things to talk about today. Thank you for joining me. Sorry I was late. It's been as I said, I didn't want to start earlier. You wouldn't have enjoyed the show. I'm doing much better now that I've talked to you and had a drink. And I will talk to you next week. This has been Martinis with Scott, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Do me a favor, go and subscribe. Tell me if you like the show. Tell me what you think you'd like to do better. If you have any questions you'd like me to talk about, be engaged. Be engaged. Let's enjoy this time together. And with that, I will talk to you next week.